Hello, guys, and welcome to Saint of the Day. Today we're going to talk about Don Bosco, an extremely important figure. His repertoire of writings and publications consists of over 220 titles collected in 38 volumes, had numerous prophetic dreams, and his guardian angel physically manifested as a great gray hound. We will talk more about that in a bit. Giovanni Melchiorre Bosco was born on the evening of August 16, 1815 in Becce, Italy. Born at a time of great scarcity and hunger in the interior of Piedmont, following the devastation caused by the Napoleonic Wars and drought in 1817, that when he was just over 2 years old, his father Francesco died, leaving the support of 3 boys to his mother, Margherita. She played a strong role in Bosco's formation and personality, and was an early defender of her son's ideals. When John Bosco was just a child, he dreamed that different types of fierce animals were chasing him. But as he fled, a female voice told him to herd them. After that, they became a flock of docile sheep. John took his dreams seriously, and despite being from a poor family with a particularly violent brother with whom he used to argue constantly, he grew up and became a parish priest in Turin. He saw several wild and ferocious animals roaming the streets. They were homeless kids from that great city, darkened by soot from factories. They were destined to grow up and become worse than animals. John Bosco's heart went in search of them. What would you do if you wanted to bring God to rough street kids? Let's just say that no matter what you did, it would help to have a physique that would be appropriate for it. John Bosco had it. He grew up doing hard work on his mother's land, which she and her brother had to tend after their father died. Plowing, planting, harvesting, tending the cows, horses, and pigs, as well as the vineyard. But John had a hobby that had nothing to do with shovels and pitchforks. He would set up a little stage in front of his friends and repeat what the priest had said on Sunday, but he would add things the priest had not said. John would walk on his hands and do acrobatics. He would do magic tricks, pulling coins out of people's ears. As a boy, he did the things he would later do for other boys. He was already an athlete for God. Many priests in Turin disliked John Bosco because all they cared about was clean clothes and drinking tea, while John walked a tightrope in front of 20 boys, catching their attention with his strength and agility, and winning their hearts with his good humor and charity, that is so they tried to stop him from acting. This is nothing new in the world. God would make John Bosco successful, despite the murmuring and envy of other members of the clergy. This is nothing new either. Who was the first boy that Father John Bosco, Don Bosco, as he was called, saved from poverty and ignorance? Well, one day, Don Bosco overheard the sacristan of his church reprimanding a teenager, a scruffy, ragged boy from the streets. He wanted the boy to attend Mass, but the boy said he didn't know how to do it. "Then go away," the sacristan shouted, but Don Bosco interrupted. "Let me keep the boy," he said. The boy's name was Bartolomeo Girelli. He was 15 years old. He didn't know when to kneel at Mass or when to stand. He didn't even know how to make the sign of the cross. So Don Bosco taught him how to do these things and made him promise to return the next day. Because the priest was kind to the boy, he kept his promise. But he went beyond that, just as John Bosco went beyond simple kindness. Bartolomeo took 2 other boys with him. Thus began Don Bosco's ministry to the marginalized youth of Turin. When the boy had a home, Don Bosco would go there to visit him and get to know his family. When the boy was hungry, Don Bosco would give him food. Like us, all boys needed God's grace. So Don Bosco would take them to church and teach them the faith. They needed to play, so he would take them to the park, where he mixed instructions with games and athletic feats. We must not think that Don Bosco was just an ordinary man who was kind to children. He was a brilliant person. During his lifetime, he wrote more books than many people. His repertoire of writings and publications consists of over 220 titles collected in 38 volumes. They were printed at his own peerless paper-to-print workshop, where boys learned the art of printing and publishing in view of future employment. His superiors gave him the chance to become a university professor. He would have accepted the job, as he was an obedient priest, but he said that he still felt it necessary to care for poor children. And that was what God had called him to do. 300 boys. And his ministry was just beginning. Think of your parish garden and imagine that there were 15 boys playing ball there. That would be something worthy of attention, wouldn't it? Not for Don Bosco. 300 boys played around his parish. Not all the priests were happy about it, nor were the people in the parish. Boys are noisy. They trample the grass. Sometimes the ball bounces in the flower beds. One of the boys might step on a lily. Terrible things like that can happen. So we have to imagine Don Bosco leading the boys on a Sunday walk for miles through the countryside, arriving at a church and asking permission to celebrate Mass with all those boys. Then having breakfast outside, followed by games, catechism lessons, and the long walk back to Turin, during which they sang hymns, as a choir would do, and prayed the rosary. The boys would remember those Sundays for the rest of their lives. Don Bosco ended up founding the Salesians, whose name was inspired by St. Francis Delaware Sales. The Salesians followed the wisdom of their founder. The key was kindness, not punishment. Don Bosco always gained the boys' obedience by treating them kindly, praising their good deeds, and showing them how much he loved them and that he would do everything in his power to feed, shelter, teach, and help them. And then to grow spiritually. It would be hard to count the thousands of houses and the hundreds of thousands of boys who received help during the life of Don Bosco. Many of the boys were orphans. Regardless of their circumstances, Don Bosco was a man, and a boy also needs the care of a mother, something he could not give them. So he begged his mother Margarita to join them. This represented a great sacrifice for her, leaving her small country house and the farm she had tended since her marriage to go to the dirty, noisy city of Turin and be a mother, housekeeper, nurse, and teacher to hundreds of boys. But she did it. They called her Mama Margarita, and her cooperation gave Don Bosco the freedom to do more and more, to teach, to found the oratory of St. Francis, to hire teachers, to found a seminary in the countryside, and to reap the rewards of vocations to the priesthood. Man and woman, mother and son, working together as if in a dance. Another very peculiar thing that happened in Don Bosco's life was a dog named Grigio. Excluding his head, he was around 3 feet tall. Take a tape measure and stretch it to the ground. That was how tall Grigio was, not counting his neck and head. He had thick grayish-white fur and a wolf-like snout. He managed to frighten the thieves and murderers who thronged the alleys of Turin. Where had Don Bosco found Grigio? Nowhere. Don Bosco did not find him. It was quite the opposite. Let us remember, "You did not choose me," Jesus said to the apostles, "but I chose you." On the many occasions when Don Bosco returned from the countryside to Turin, or while he was walking the streets of the city at night, this magnificent animal would appear out of nowhere to walk beside him, just as assassins were about to jump out at Don Bosco in the dark and kill him. Grigio once grabbed a bad man by the throat and would have killed him if the man had not begged Don Bosco to send the dog away. The boys loved Grigio, but they could never get him to eat what they gave him. Grigio refused, even when they let him into the refectory. Grigio appeared when Don Bosco needed his protection. Then he left. That was all. He even appeared to the priest and a friend of his 30 years later, when they were lost at night in a swamp full of quicksand. If only Grigio were here, Don Bosco cried, when in fact the dog was there, leading them out of danger by a zigzag path.